This video is not sponsored by Skillshare. Pop the champagne! Okay, someone needs to make a massive fucking apology over this one, because this may be one of the few cases where a game has managed to piss off all parties involved without putting too much into doing so. The fact that this one promised so much and then failed to deliver might be one case. The fact that this one was probably one of the most poorly optimised games I've ever played, despite it being out for several years now, may be another. The fact that this game was more focused on releasing more DLC and collector's editions instead of fine-tuning their product might be another one too. Or that this was originally crowdfunded before being picked up by Gearbox might be another reason. Or hell, perhaps it's just another dull crafting/survival game with repetitive gameplay and quests that did it. Personally, I was more pissed off at the stealth more than anything else, but I know that some people have gotten quite defensive about others being overly critical of this game. You can see where this joke is leading us to, right? I mean, I know it's low-hanging fruit and all, but I want to make myself think that I'm awesome at writing too, so I guess those people can refer to themselves as we happy few! But honestly, this game is a tragedy all round. Now, I can explain what this game is about, and it would sound like I'm talking about one of the most creative games to have come out in a long time, but get down to its base level and it just sucks. I honestly think that the best part about this game is its setting and concept, and there are a couple of other features that I thought were quite neat, but it's literally the other 98% of the game that lets it down. We Happy Few is set in an alternative timeline taking place in 1964. In this timeline, the Americans never joined World War II, meaning that Great Britain lost the war. Okay, first of all, like fuck we did, we're British after all, the greatest nation on earth. We have the Queen on our side. Invincible. We cannot be defeated. Shut up, you stupid tart. Now, suspend your disbelief for a moment if that's even possible. The Second World War went on for longer in this timeline than it did in ours, but eventually, in the 1950s, the inhabitants of a small village/town called Wellington Wells, a fictional English community, managed to convince the Germans to abandon the British Isles by doing something that would become referred to as a very bad thing. On a quick side note, this video is going to contain a fuck bunch of spoilers, including what I'm about to say, so ta-ta if you don't like spoilers. The very bad thing was that the inhabitants of this town struck a deal with the Nazis where, in return for going home, the Germans were to get all children from this town under the age of 13. They agreed, loaded the kids onto trains, and these children are literally never heard from again. This liberated Britain from Nazi occupation. However, the people of Wellington Wells, as you can imagine, immediately sobered up to the colossal fuck-up of theirs and started to go a bit suicidal. The answer to this problem came in the form of a drug called joy, a substance that creates a euphoric state and altered perception of the world for the user, but also came with some concerning side effects, including memory loss, laziness, potential vomiting, and in some cases, a tolerance to it. It quickly became mandatory for all citizens of Wellington Wells to take joy regularly, so as to make them forget about their collaboration with the enemy, and the only way that this can be enforced is through, well, force. The community transforms into a dystopian state where the masses are forced to live a drug-induced dream, as well as being made to wear white masks that conforms the wearer's face into a permanent smile. Meanwhile, the town begins to fall apart since no one's doing any work anymore. The place is about to blow up, and farming ceased several years ago, so now everyone's beginning to starve. However, not everyone has bought into this lifestyle. Some people have gained a tolerance to joy, meaning that they don't feel the effects of it anymore. These people are either cast out into the countryside, experimented on by doctors, or just killed on the spot. Other people refuse to take the drug, thus being labelled as downers, who are also considered a threat to society. For those who have read the dystopian classics before, there may be some themes here that seem familiar to you. The concept of people being made to take happy pills was taken from Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. There are also influences taken from George Orwell's 1984 and Animal Farm. I mean, there's a museum in the Parade District that tries to imagine what life in 20 years from now will be like, which, according to this game, is literally the year 1984. Personally, I love the backstory here. The setting, the concept is all great, and I'll come on to the copious drug taking later on, but my point is that at this point, this is a very, very strong start to this game, as I'm sure you'll agree. Unfortunately though, that's pretty much where all the good stuff ends, but before I dive into the bad stuff, let's talk about the plot of the game itself, cover what else I thought was good, and then head to the bad aisle to pick up some shit. The game is divided into 3 chapters, or acts if you will, and you'll play a different character in each of them. Act 1 is centred around a guy called Arthur Morgan. Oh, if only. It's Arthur Hastings in reality. He works for a publication agency that goes through all the past newspapers they can find and redacting anything that might make the reader upset. However, like everyone else in town, Arthur is haunted by the past in that his brother Percy was one of the children who was sent to Germany. Arthur then decides to try to remember his brother more, and in doing so chooses to come off his joy, effectively turning him into a downer. Alternatively, you can choose to take your joy at the start of the game for the world's fastest game over. He is swiftly chased out of town because of this and now has to start searching for both the truth and his brother from the ruins of the countryside. The game is a first-person survival crafting stealth combat RPG that tries to emulate games such as Stellaris and Minecraft, and obviously that was a joke. But why not, since it tries to be everything? This game came out when the gaming market was already saturated with games with survival and crafting elements to it, and We Happy Few is no different here. Craft healing items, gadgets such as lockpicks, hacking tools, etc. You can craft weapons, consumables which will give you temporary buffs. You can even craft items that are required to craft more items. Which seems like a waste of the player's time, but that's just me. There are also crafting benches that are sometimes compulsory for some quests, as you can craft most stuff on the fly, but some items can't be crafted unless you're at a crafting bench, and even then, it has to be the right one, since you've got workbenches for non-chemical crafting, and you've got a chemistry bench for non-chemical crafting. The crafting is kind of essential in this game, since that's how you're going to get most of your healing items, which means that you need components. Which means you're going to need to break into people's houses and loot everything that isn't nailed down, even if you're not sure if you need that mouldy loaf of bread or not. And then there's food too. Okay, thankfully this isn't exactly necessary since you can go without having to do any of this, but you have a thirst, hunger and sleep meter. Should any of these drop too low, then you'll be inflicted with a stamina debuff, and I'll talk about stamina when we come onto combat. Now, you can sleep in beds to raise your sleep meter, but you'll have to eat and drink for the other 2. Most food you'll find initially will be rotten, which you can still eat, but you run the risk of getting food poisoning, which is another debuff, while water to begin with will be laced with joy, which can come in handy in some cases, but generally, no, try not to drink that stuff if you can, for reasons we'll get to later on. So yeah, there's an added reason to spend a while out in the field, picking flowers and looting literally every house you walk past, because you're going to need that stuff. As said, this game is divided into 3 sections, where you play as a different character each time, and as you move from act to act, the character you're playing will have certain strengths and weaknesses. For example, Arthur can pretty much do everything and is a well-rounded character, but Sally in Act 2 can't use workbenches or wield heavy weapons, while Ollie can't use chemistry benches and is more of an obvious target when it comes to stealth. I think this was supposed to act as a difficulty curve, and it's a creative difficulty curve for sure, but I'm really trying my best here to save all the negative things I have to say about this game for later, so I guess we'll come back to this later on. There's also a conformity mechanic present in this game too, and honestly, I actually quite like this. All 3 characters you play as are considered outside of society in some form or another. All 3 aren't taking joy, and thus don't fit in with everyone else. However, since this is a police state, everyone needs to conform to a strict set of social behaviours, which you must abide by at all times if you don't want to get caught. In addition to not committing your usual crimes such as murder, assault, theft, trespassing, etc, etc, these codes of conduct also include not running in front of other people, not staring at people in public, not crouching in public, being dressed appropriately, not being out in town at night past a certain time, and in some cases, being under the effects of joy. People in town are expected to dress nicely, and if you walk into town wearing a ripped jacket or a rubber fetish suit, and no, I'm not making that last one up, then people are going to think that you're either trouble or have been involved in trouble, which means that you are trouble, meaning that they're going to call the police. Equally, if you walk through the Garden District, where those who have been cast out of society live, if you walk past them all suited and booted in your Sunday best, or even your rubber fetish suit again, then they're going to perceive that as an insult to how they're living and will try to attack you. I did, however, like walking about town wearing the fab threads in Act 1 though, because it felt like I was impersonating Austin Powers.
Yeah, baby!
And then there's Joy. Which means I can now talk about pretty much the only feature of this game left that I actually quite liked. There are times throughout this game where taking Joy will be required, and it's certainly an interesting feature. There are various places about town where there are Joy Detectors, in that it'll only safely let people pass who are under the effects of the drug. If they detect that someone isn't on it, then it'll either sound the alarms, trigger sentry traps, call the police, or in most cases, all of the above. Joy can be found all over town, and there are even red telephone booths that actually act as joy dispensers, so no, you can't make a quick phone call to the Queen here, unfortunately. After taking a chill pill, the world around you will suddenly become much more colourful and slightly trippy, with characters having a spring in their step and all other town inhabitants becoming a bit more relaxed around you, though bear in mind that you can still make people angry if you break the law. This is also one of few ways of avoiding detection from a certain enemy referred to as Doctors, who can actually smell if you're not under the effects of joy. However, while this all seems like a great way of cheesing the mechanics by staying under this drug's effects for as long as possible, there are drawbacks to the player for using this drug. First of all, the withdrawal symptoms. Eventually your joy is going to wear off, and entering withdrawal is the complete opposite of being on joy. If being on joy is all colourful and bubbly, then withdrawal is like going from playing Super Mario 64 to playing Fallout 3 in a second or something. I don't know where I was going with that. It takes a very dark and disgusting turn very quickly, in that everything around you just seems shit and decaying and dark and just generally unpleasant. However, each time you take a joy pill, you also build up another gauge on the side. This is the memory loss gauge, and once it hits 100%, you'll have an extra long, extra intense withdrawal from joy, including vomiting and such. The point of these withdrawal features is to subtly inform the player that taking joy is a last resort. You're going to want to avoid taking it if you can, and only take it strategically if you really have to. After all, going through joy withdrawal in front of other people will make them attack you, so in these cases, it forces the player to go hide in an alleyway for what feels like forever, waiting for the effects to wear off, and not playing the actual bloody game. Wait, that sounded like a criticism, didn't it? Okay, fuck it. The chains have been broken, and I'm going to let it all out now. I am done talking about what I liked here, so here we go. There's a lot to get through too. On the subject of joy, why is it that literally everyone else in town is able to take joy all fucking day long without issues, but if I take so much as one pill, I'm forced to go and cry in an alleyway while I'm going through withdrawal? And this debuff lasts for so fucking long. It doesn't need to last this long. In these cases, I always end up checking my phone or going downstairs for a glass of water or something, just as a way of killing time till the withdrawal debuff had had enough of me. At least you can craft Sunshine in Act 2 as Sally, which is a drug that acts like joy, but without the withdrawal. Now, aside from the survival and crafting, there are two other big mechanics to this game, and those are combat and stealth. The combat in this game is fucking awful, but I get the impression that it's kind of supposed to be. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the combat in the original Thief games was bad, but that's because you weren't supposed to get into combat in the first place. The idea was to stealth it, not to kill everyone, and getting into combat was more of a fuck up on your end than anything else. So, okay, I can accept that that might be the case here too, so long as the stealth works just fine. But while the combat in this game is fucking awful, the stealth in this game is fucking awful, so you can't win! There are a lot of weapons you can find and even make in this game. Ollie and Arthur can pretty much wield anything, Sally can only wield smaller weapons. Sexist. Now, you've got your normal standard attack, block, and believe it or not, but power attacks are an upgrade, because it's only after doing several favours for people that the player character will then go, huh, what about if I was to just hit enemies really hard? Like it's some massive revelation. However, using your weapon and even blocking will deplete stamina, and this is where being well rested and well fed and watered comes into play, because if you're not, then you're inflicted with a stamina debuff, which means you're less effective in combat, and combat here sucks, because you can only defend or attack one person at a time, but you're always attacked by multiple people. Also, trying to heal mid-fight is practically impossible, since you have to hold down a key to use the healing item, all the while the enemy is still attacking you, and you can't heal and defend at the same time, obviously. One option is to just run away, as the game hints, but I found that this doesn't work in most cases if you're being attacked as part of a quest, because being attacked means that you're in combat mode. If other NPCs see that you're in combat mode, they'll try to attack you too, regardless if you're the one being attacked. They won't, however, attack other NPCs under any circumstance, unless they're plague victims, but now I'm just getting technical. In one case, I was attacked as part of a quest by 4 thugs. I decided to run right past them and look for the nearest Bobby to help me. The Bobby took one look at me, saw I was in combat mode, and decided to attack me as well. I ended up running down the street looking for somewhere to hide, all the while aggroing literally everyone I passed by, because they don't like people who are both in combat and running. In fact, there were many times throughout the game where I'd casually be walking down the street, not doing anything wrong, and some nearby NPCs would still aggro onto me. But after managing to get away, I'd go back and those exact same NPCs would be like, "Hello, lovely day for it." Like, mate, what the f was that about just now? There's your main quest here, of course, and they'll sometimes reward you with skill points, but there are also side quests too. Completing these will usually give you more skill points and items. Skill points are purely used to unlock perks that will either enhance certain abilities or stats you have, or make things a little easier. But while I said that there are a few aspects about this game I enjoyed, there are some perks here that will just flat out make entire features of this game redundant. For example, breaking curfew in this game is a crime, and bobbies will attack you if they see you out past a certain time of day. Or you can just buy a perk that means they won't care if they see you anymore. You have to make sure that you behave yourself in town by not running, crouching, staring, etc. Or you can just buy a perk that makes everyone not give a shit if you do that. Don't like it when you get a stamina debuff from not eating food or drinking water? Well, there's a perk that removes those debuffs, rendering the whole survival aspect of this game pointless. Ollie can't stay under the effects of joy for too long and will always throw up if he takes it, or you can just buy a perk that removes that feature entirely. Conformity makes this game a little more challenging in that you need to plan what you're doing ahead of time, and I can't tell you how many times I entered an area in the wrong outfit, but I actually like this feature here, as it's something you don't normally see very often in games, but this one just lets you ignore most of it for the low price of one upgrade. Lazy. Speaking of upgrades that makes aspects redundant, there's one here that lets you eat mouldy food without getting food poisoning, effectively removing the point of there being both clean and dirty food entirely. The stealth is just as bad too. Things like line of sight, lighting, even the clothes you wear will affect how visible or audible you are. But I swear that none of that is true, because there were so many times where the AI would just turn around for no reason the moment you're behind them, or behave in such an erratic manner that I honestly felt that they'd just pop out the woodwork at times.
Ain't it past your bedtime?
Stop right there, criminal scum! Nobody breaks the law on my watch!
And I think I might be right there, because there were several times I actually did see other NPCs getting stuck in the surrounding scenery. The problem with stealth in this game is that it's not only a great example of bad stealth, but it seems to go one step further. True to form, if one enemy knows where you are, then even the old deer down the road knows your exact location, and despite the rules against people running or making noise, she's speeding her way down the street, shrieking while wielding a rolling pin. But if I've locked myself in the bathroom where there's no one else in there except for me, then I don't expect another NPC to no-clip their way through the wall and unlock the door for the very angry mob waiting for me on the other side. The amount of times enemies snuck up on me in this way was incredible, and honestly, I'd say that this is by far the scariest game I've played recently purely for that reason alone. Now, I understand that this game did receive some praise for how well the 3 playable characters were written, and I guess I must have been playing a different game then. It's not like I didn't like any of them, but it's not like I walked away from this game thinking, well, at least we had good characters there. For one, I couldn't take Arthur seriously, because he always talked like this. Look at me, my name's Arthur Hastings, and I'm speaking in a British accent, I am. I'm off down the pub for a cup of tea and some fish and chips. Then there was Sally, who kind of sucked to play as, since despite the game's greatest chemist, she couldn't exactly figure out how to use workbenches, and I've never played a game as a mother before, nor have I ever seen actual mother mechanics either, but this game has mother mechanics, in that Sally has the only baby in Wellington Wells, and you have to tend to the little bastard every so often, because it turns out the babies need feeding. The ironic thing about this, however, is that you gain a stamina buff if you cradle your baby in your arms for several seconds, telling the player that this is a mood buff because Sally thinks she might be a decent mother after all, but then she fucks off for days on end, leaving the baby unattended! I am not a parent, but even I know you can't leave children unattended like that. You can literally buy a device that feeds your baby for you, and you don't have to go and check on her until the main quest forces you to. Mother of the Year, ladies and gentlemen. Give her a hand! But maybe I should have gone back more often and checked on the baby now that I think about it. That would explain why Sally would randomly scream every so often for no reason when I played as her.
What?
And then there's Ollie. Now, the challenge playing as Sally was that she was a mother, not good in combat, and no use of workbenches. Meanwhile, Ollie couldn't use chemistry benches, and his weakness is diabetes.
Diabetes.
I'm actually a little surprised that diabetes has been reduced down to a video game mechanic here, but putting the possibly ethics debate to the side on that one for someone else to handle, it does mean that you have a blood sugar gauge that needs to be kept in the middle throughout most of the game. If it drops too low, then you'll have, surprise surprise, a stamina debuff applied to you, while too high means... I don't know, I never actually let it get too high. You'll need to craft glucose shots to keep your blood sugar levels high enough throughout your playthrough by crafting them out of honey and empty syringes, and if this game wanted to keep things genuine, then I think they should have been more focused on the fact that I was crafting glucose shots using syringes that I found in rubbish bins, in trash cans in people's bathrooms, and down toilets, since infection's probably going to kill you faster than low blood sugar levels, but hey, I'm not a fucking doctor, am I? And I didn't really like Ollie as a character anyway, since most of his personality can be boiled down to
English bastard! English fucking bastard! English! English bastard Englishman! English bastard!
But probably everyone's biggest gripe with this game is just how poorly optimised it is. The amount of bugs, glitches and breaks in this game is nothing short of incredible. I managed to get several good ones on camera, check it out.
Why look so awfully tragic? Put on a happy face. Smiling can work like magic. Put on a happy face. Take off the gloomy mask of tragedy. It's not your style. You look so good that you'll be glad you decided to smile. Pick out a pleasant outlook, stick out that noble chin. Wipe off the full of doubt look, slap on a happy grin. And spread sunshine all over the place. Just put on a happy face.
I also found that this game's quite easily broken. In Sally's act, I ended up looting a guy called Nick's house, for the fun of it, just to see what he had. During this burglary, I ended up taking an item that I later found out was going to be an essential quest item. Later in that chapter, one of the quest givers asked me to get them said item from Nick's house, but rather than the game going, oh yeah, okay, right, yeah, you already have it, okay, just hand it over. The game instead made me go all the way over to Nick's house, made me walk through the front door, and only then did the game go, wait, you already have this item. What are you doing here then? Just go and turn the quest in. In Ollie's chapter, I somehow managed to softlock the game in that it thought I was in combat mode even when no one was aggroed onto me. And I couldn't proceed with the story because a cutscene wouldn't start until I was out of combat. And you can't save during combat either, so I had to quit the game and reload it just to continue. Sometimes you'd get a side quest, and the quest itself would just stop working, such as the quest giver just straight up vanishing from the in-game map, or even the game itself just deciding to crash the desktop, which happens all the goddamn time for me. I also think this game is in dire need of proofreading too, because there were so many spelling mistakes and grammatical errors in the subtitles that it's not even funny. The amount of sentences that started with lowercase letters, and even sentences that didn't match up with what was being said, was an absolute joke. You can see why people were pissed off with this game, considering that it started out as a privately funded Kickstarter project before getting picked up by Gearbox. Personally, I think those 7,433 backers should have been given their money back, but hey, that's just me. Also, something else I noticed in this game, and I really can't tell if it's intentional or not, but I swear that the game map kept changing each time a new chapter started. It really felt like the location of certain buildings or even areas wouldn't be the same on each new chapter, despite this being set on the same map. And I have reason to believe that this is the case because all three playable characters do meet each other at times, but their meeting is always different. In Arthur's chapter, most of your meetings with Sally take place in her house, but when those scenes play out in Sally's chapter, they're behind a ruined building in the Garden District. And the conversations changed a little. Is this supposed to be the effects of prolonged joy abuse? Because if so, then colour me impressed, but I'm not so sure. And none of this is ever explained, nor is there any reason why you're playing as these three characters in particular, when an interesting concept might have been to play as Uncle Jack just before he went bonkers and had to escape town or whatever. Finally, there's the quests themselves. Now, this game has been criticised for its repetitive gameplay, and I absolutely agree with that point here, but I'd add that it didn't have to or need to be like that, considering that the game did include some really, and surprisingly, good quests here. Not many, mind you, and you could easily miss some of them. There's a quest where you're forced to help the local butcher process human bodies into meat since there's no local meat source anymore, all the while being zapped with electricity for not working fast enough, turning the whole thing into some kind of Sweeney Todd simulator. Or another one where you have to make a group of people lose at a game of Simon Says. These were a much needed breath of fresh air compared to the countless quests that you get to go backwards and forwards, passing items between NPCs, or going to point A, pick up an item, return to point B, no, you need a different item, go to point C, get the new item, return to point B, great, now I need this item, etc, etc. Even the concept of having to look after a baby during this game was a novel idea. I just think it was a terrible idea in execution, since it meant that you were supposed to drop whatever quest you were doing and go and feed your savagely neglected spawn, while also considering that more than one person has broken into your house during this chapter, yet you still left that baby at home on their own. Sorry, I'll stop hammering that point now. In conclusion, if it's not obvious by now, then here you go. Don't get this game. It's a broken mess even after 3 years of being released. They're slightly interesting at best, and practically unplayable at worst. I got this game where it was on sale for 90% off or something ridiculous, and even then I think I might have paid too much for this one. My advice if you really are interested in this is just watch someone's playthrough and don't waste your money on it yourself. I got an achievement for finishing this game, and according to Steam, it's a rare achievement since only 5.5% of players who own this on Steam have actually finished it, and that should tell you everything you need to know about this game. Oh right, and then there's the ending. And my question is this, what was the bloody point of both the ending and everything we went through? In the end, Sally escapes with her baby, Ollie lets go of Margaret after learning the truth and presumably fucks off to Scotland. Meanwhile, Arthur leaves to find his brother. I mean, wasn't that the point of Arthur's entire arc? He spends the whole game looking for his brother, who's in Germany for all we know, and this is England, but we don't find out at the end if he ever does find him. Instead, he comes across a teenager with an out-of-place younger voice who tells him,
"It's been shitty all day. Did you not notice the drops of water falling out of the sky? It's gonna be shitty tonight too."
You're right. It has been rather a shit day.
And that's it. That is literally it. I think you just presume that since the truth got out near the end, Wellington Wells collapses anyway, so giving Arthur the choice to go back at the end to play on the kids set was a bit of a weird option. But I just don't get the point of it all. Everyone escapes Wellington Wells, sure, but what was the main point of the story? Not to cause a revolution, not for Arthur to find his brother, not for all three of these stories to converge into a bigger point. No, ladies and gentlemen, the point of the game is this.
You're right. It has been rather a shit game.